So we've been looking at the life of Abraham, and I want to talk about making mistakes. Now, we've talked about this before with Abraham. Remember a few weeks ago, he made a big mistake. Does anyone remember that?
His wife?
Sorry?
His wife?
Twice.
No, his wife.
His wife made a mistake.
No! I think you mean. He told the king.
He told the king
that his wife was his sister.
He told the king that his wife. He told his wife that the king was his sister. he told the king that his wife was his sister. Why did he do that? To save his neck. Because he was worried that they'd do away with him and take away his stunning 90-year-old wife.
She wasn't.
88. You ever make mistakes? We all make mistakes, isn't it? The kind of mistake you can make is, if you're applying for a job and you put on your CV, the reason for leaving your last job was because the company made you a scapegoat for all the problems, just like the previous 3 employers. That's not going to go down well, is it? They're going to read something into that. When I was in my first job when I left school, gosh, so last century, I was working for the electricity board, the Merseyside and North Wales Electricity Board, Manweb it was called, what a great name, Manweb. And we had an engineer there. These were intelligent people who were really, they got degrees and everything. And this one engineer, he got a bald head, and he came in one day and he got 5 identical marks, 5 identical scars on his bald head, and there was no hiding them. So they were just there, they wanted to see him. Somebody asked him what had happened. And he said, well, he'd had a skip delivered because he was clearing out some rubbish. But rather than leaving it on the street where everyone can fill it for you before you get a chance, or empty it before it gets collected or whatever, he had it put in his garage. Cunning, you see, put it in the garage so nobody else could get to it. And then he put a plank up to it so he could then run his wheelbarrow up this plank to tip it into the skip. Except, of course, the roof of the garage isn't very high. So as he went up the wheelbarrow, he banged his head on the inside of the garage door. And they said, but you got 5 times. He said, oh, well, I kept doing it. Kept repeating the same mistake. Abraham made mistakes. We all make mistakes, don't we? And we're going to talk about how Abraham made another mistake. Oh, this was something that I came across as well. It might entertain you a little bit. This was an advert in the classified section of a United States newspaper. And it said this, on the Monday, the advert ran like this: the Reverend A.J. Jones has 1 colour TV set for sale. Telephone, and there's the number, after 7 p.m, and that's for Mrs. Donnelly, who lives with him. Cheap. So the next day they thought they'd make this a bit embarrassing, so there was a correction in the newspaper the next day. We regret any embarrassment caused to Reverend Jones by a typographical error in yesterday's paper. The ad should have read, the Reverend A.J. Jones has 1 colour TV set for sale, cheap. Telephone that number, and that's for Mrs. Donnelly, who lives with him after 7 p.m. On Wednesday they published this. The Reverend Jones informs us that he has received several annoying telephone calls because of an incorrect ad in yesterday's paper. He should have read, the Reverend Jones has 1 colour TV set for sale, cheap. Telephone that number after 7 p.m, and that's for Mrs. Donnelly, who loves with him. On Thursday it says, please take notice that the Reverend Jones, have no colour TV set for sale. I've smashed it. Don't call that number anymore. I've not been carrying on with Mrs. Donnelly. She was until yesterday my housekeeper. And on Friday, wanted housekeeper. Usual housekeeping duties, good rate, good pay. And there we go. Here we go. This is Genesis chapter 20. We're moving into. So Abraham and his wife Sarah are still waiting for God to fulfill this promise that they will have their own child. And he's moving around in the promised land, the land that God told him that he and his descendants would occupy. And it says this: Abraham moved to the southern desert where he settled between Kadesh and Shur. Later he went to Gerar, and while there he told everyone that his wife Sarah was his sister. Been there before, haven't we? So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. But God came to Abimelech in a dream and said, "You have taken a married woman, and for this you will die." Abimelech said to the Lord, "Don't kill me. I haven't slept with Sarah. Didn't they say they were brother and sister? I am completely innocent." God spoke to Abimelech again in a dream and said, "I know you're innocent. That's why I kept you from sleeping with Sarah and doing anything wrong. Her husband is a prophet. Let her go back to him, and his prayers will save you from death. But if you don't return her, you and all your people will die." Early in the morning, not hanging around, Abimelech sent for his officials, and when he told them what had happened, they were frightened. Abimelech then called in Abraham and said, "Look, what you've done to us. What have I ever done to you? Why did you make me and my nation guilty of such a terrible sin? What were you thinking when you did this?" Abraham answered, "I did it because I didn't think any of you respected God, and I was sure that someone would kill me to get my wife. Besides, she is my half-sister. We have the same father, but different mothers. When God made us leave my father's home and start wandering, I told her, 'If you really love me, you will tell everyone that I am your brother.'" Abimelech gave Abraham some sheep, cattle and slaves. He sent Sarah back and told Abraham that he could settle anywhere in his country. Then he said to Sarah, "I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver as proof to everyone that you have done nothing wrong." Meanwhile, God had kept Abimelech's wife and slaves from having children. Abraham prayed, and God let them start having children again. Let me ask you a question before we go any further. Who acted the most honourably in this situation? The king Abimelech, yeah. How do you think God felt about Abraham? Raised his eyebrows. Surprise or disappointment? Yeah. Here we go again. Okay. Have you not learned anything, Abraham? So we're thinking about living a fruitful life, how we can have a positive impact on other people. By the way, you have an impact on other people, whether you think it or not, don't you? Sometimes we think we can sort of shut ourselves away and we have very little interaction with anybody else, but you do have an impact, whether you like it or not. And what we want is the impact we have on others to be positive. For them to see something in us that makes them realise that we're followers of Jesus Christ. Something different in a good way, not in a weird way. Because sadly there are many Christians who can do that. They can act a bit weird and people think, oh yeah, one of those religious nutters. Yeah, so we don't want to be doing that. We want to have a positive impact on people. By the way, it doesn't matter how normal you are, some people will think of you as a religious nutter anyway, and there's nothing you can do about that. That's their prejudice, their preconception of what they think of you. But there we go. First thing we want to learn from this is learn from your mistakes. Because we're fallible, we get things wrong. It's better to try and fail rather than to not try at all. Homer Simpson, that speaker of many great truths, said to his son Bart once, "Remember, son, trying is the first step towards failure." In other words, it's better not to try than to make a mess of things. But it's better to try and fail and hopefully learn from that than to not bother in the first place. I remember growing up in Wales in a very distant memory this, but in the infant school we were told we were going to have our first Welsh lesson. And in infant school, remember you have the same teacher teaches everything. Okay, so that's how multi-skilled they are. But for this Welsh lesson, we were going to have the headmaster of the school was coming in to teach us Welsh. And he was quite a fearful kind of character because he was probably one of the few males in the school, and he was very tall and domineering. And in those days, in the late 1890s, everybody had this awe and respect for the head teacher. And certainly his name, he was Mr. Charles. He was known, not to his face, as Pop Charles. But he was this man, and he came into this class, and we were all, myself and all my colleagues, we were in awe of this guy and a bit trembling. And he said, "I've come in to teach you how to speak Welsh." And this lad said, "Excuse me, sir, I can't speak Welsh." Well, none of us could. This was our first lesson. But it's just like he was terrified he was going to mess up because he couldn't do it. Well, this is where it starts. We have to learn something first of all. And as we said before, learning from our mistakes, Abraham had done the same thing way back in chapter 12. When he went into Egypt, he said to Pharaoh, and everyone said, "Oh, Sarah, yeah, she's my sister. Don't kill me for her, she's my sister." And here he is repeating the same mistake years later. Have you ever made the same mistake more than once? We do. Don't give up. Keep trying. Abraham still hadn't learned his lesson. In fact, we're not going on to this, but in chapter 26, Abraham's son, Isaac, he hasn't even got a son yet, but his son Isaac does the same thing with his wife, Rebecca. When he's in a strange land, I think that's Egypt, he goes into Egypt, and he says, "She's my sister." Making the same mistake his father had made a couple of times before. Learn from your mistakes. Don't give up, try and do better. Next lesson from this is to maintain your integrity. What's your integrity? Good job you came, because nobody knows. Right? So you do, but it's hard to say, isn't it? Somebody once described your integrity as who you are when nobody's looking. Be the real you. Sadly, Abraham didn't maintain his integrity in this incident. How can you maintain your integrity? Avoid lies, and half-truths. Abraham's defense was, well, technically she is my sister. He hadn't been complete with the truth. He held things back. Truth has a way of coming out. Better to be honest and truthful in all situations. And keep trusting God more than yourself. Because God has made promises to Abraham and Sarah, and they haven't happened yet. So Abraham isn't going to die in this situation he finds himself in, because if he does, God has failed to keep his promise. Hang on to what God has said. Trust that. Trust his will. Trust what he has promised. Trust his word more than the evidence of your eyes. Trust God more than yourself. Abraham, in this instance, is sort of saying, that I'm going to help you out here, God, because you got me in a tricky situation, so we'll say Sarah's my wife, everyone will be safe, and then you can carry on struggling to give us a child at the age of knocking on 100. Keep trusting what God has said. Maintain your integrity at all times. But finally, your actions impact others. That's your fruitfulness, having that positive impact on those we meet for the sake of the kingdom of God. Act honourably in all situations. And as we said before, very sadly, it was King Abimelech, this pagan king, who acted the most honourably in this situation. Did that fly land on my head? Does it stay? Has it gone? Okay. Right, because I want to sort of do that now. But it's gone, that's good. Okay, so act honourably. Abimelech, this pagan king, maintained his honour and the honour of Sarah, who's now about 90 or 91 years old. Whereas Abraham, the prophet of God, was found out to be untrustworthy. What a sad situation to be in. On Tuesday, I've got a confession to make now. I might edit this out of the video, but I'm going to make a confession to you. On Tuesday, We were over in North Wales. We went onto the island of Anglesey with our daughter Sarah and some friends who are they're family without any blood connection. In fact, some of them are coming to stay with us next weekend. Hopefully they're going to be here with us on the Sunday. And we went over to this lovely beach called Newborough, and we spent the afternoon just chilling there, and then we were heading back to Llandudno on the mainland to have dinner and meeting up with my parents there. And so I was leading the way in my car, and friends were behind, following, shot across the Britannia Bridge down the A55, pulled up in Llandudno, and as we got out the cars, David, a friend who'd been following, said, "You drive fast for a man of the church." Oops. Now David at the moment isn't a follower of Jesus Christ. And I felt so ashamed. Because I wasn't fine. I was pushing the speed limit on the dual carriageway. And I thought, this does not look good, does it? This is not a positive impact on somebody else. And I felt really ashamed of myself. In fact, I was so ashamed that I was determined that when we drove home from Wales on Wednesday, I was going to keep to the speed limit all the way back. I wish I could have done. We couldn't, because we couldn't get that fast, because we queued pretty much the whole way home. And I was so disappointed because I wanted to show Ellen, look, I'm a reformed character, so we couldn't do that. But there we go. Let's be honourable, act honourably. If we want to be fruitful, maintain your integrity, act honourably. Other people's fruitfulness may depend on you. Wouldn't it be good if the people that you have an impact on, their lives are fruitful too? Abraham was going to be a source of blessing to the whole world. But in his deceit, he brought a halt to Abimelech's fruitfulness. Just at the very end of that reading, we find out that Abimelech and his whole household, they had not been fruitful. God had stopped them having children. We don't know how long this incident took place for, but none of them could have children. And here's I'm going to say weird thing. That's the theological term. Okay? So here's the weird thing. God tells Abraham to pray for Abimelech. Abraham prays, and Abimelech and all his household, including his slaves and servants, they can have children through the prayers of Abraham. Who's waiting for children? Abraham and Sarah. So somehow God is using them to bring fruitfulness to somebody else that at the moment has been delayed for himself. God's timing is always perfect. And if you're waiting for the fulfillment of some promise, you've got to hang on to that. If we keep trusting God, if we keep living out our trust, living our trust so that it shows in our actions, not just something we hold inside, but we act differently, acting in a way that shows that we trust God. If we're living that out, then God will be blessed. You know, when things get difficult, there's a danger of falling back into our old ways. When things become difficult, there's a danger of us resorting to our own resources rather than trusting God. Losing sight of what He has said, losing sight of His ways of doing things and His timing and His promises, and trying to sort things out ourselves. We need to keep trusting God and His Word and His promises, because we never know the impact of our lives on others. We live it out, behave honourably, we will have a positive impact on others. And their fruitfulness, by the way, gets credited to us. Their fruitfulness gets credited to us. What I mean by that is the good things that are produced in their lives, we've had a part in that, even though they're completely separate people to us. So in conclusion, what do we say? Have we ever made a mistake? Have you ever repeated a mistake? Will you make mistakes in the future? Probably. Even without the gift of prophecy, you could say that we're probably going to make mistakes in the future. There's a good possibility we'll repeat mistakes we've made in the past. Don't give up. I remember hearing about there was a boy was on the sports day in school, and his dad had taken time off work to come and watch him. And he was so excited that his dad was there, and he really wanted to impress his dad when he was running this race in the school sports day. So his dad's waiting at the sideline, he's lined up with all his friends, waiting for the ready, steady, go, whatever it was that was going to start this race off. And he looks to make sure his dad's watching, and he's so determined to make his dad proud. And the race starts, and he's running as fast as he can, and he's running really hard, and then he's putting in so much effort, he stumbles and he falls down, and everybody else gets past, and this boy looks over and he sees his dad still watching, and he thinks, oh no, I've let my dad down. And he gets up and he runs as hard as he can, trying to catch up with the others, and just as he's catching up with them, he falls down again. And he looks, and his dad's still watching, and he doesn't know what he can do, but he gets up and he runs again. I don't know how long this race was, but he's running again, and he's doing his best to try and catch up, and he falls down again. And he thinks, what's the point? He's not good enough. He's never going to catch up with the others. He's letting himself down, he's let his dad down. And he just curls up on the floor in the middle of this racetrack and sobs his heart out because he's failed and failed and failed again. And then the next thing was the hand on his shoulder, and he looks, and his dad stood next to him, and his dad says, come on son, there's still a race to run. And he takes him by the hand and he helps him to his feet, and they make it to the finish line. They didn't win the race, but they won because they didn't give up. There's a Japanese saying that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8 times. When you fail, when you let yourself down, when you let your Heavenly Father down, don't give up, because He doesn't. And He's always ready to come alongside you and help you back to your feet. Because although we're running the race for Him, He runs with us. And He's with us at all times, ready to get us back on our feet and to restore us. He knows the depths of our heart. He loves us just the same. What a faithful God. Amen.